columnist for the Charleston Coastal Times, as well as the author of Voices of Black South Carolina, Legend and Legacy. Its companion piece, The True Stories of Black South Carolina, and, as co-author, Born to Serve, History of WEMBC, Women's Educational and Missionary Baptist Convention. His books document the voices of black South Carolinians who are not well known in the history, and he wrote them by doing independent research into old newspaper and other archives. His fourth book, Mr. Potts and Me, a semi-autobiographical story loosely based on the stories told him by his father, is well underway. He has also commented on history and storytelling for numerous radio and television programs, and we would like to introduce Brother Damon Fordham.
You know that as summertime. It's done in the tale of Porgy and Bess. Many people don't know that the story had its origin based on two things. Here in Charleston in 1924, a disabled African-American street beggar by the name of Samuel Smalls was arrested for shooting at his wife over on Romney Street. However, he was a well-known individual in this community, known for singing and selling his wares on the streets in order to survive in his condition. After his arrest, a man by the name of Du Bois Hayward read his story in the Charleston News and Courier of March the 1st, 1924. And it was reading that story that inspired him to write the great opera that we know today as Porgy and Bess. Much of Charleston's story is based on the coming together of different groups of people in that fashion. The original settlers in Charleston were the American Indians with tribes names such as the Wando, the Wadmalaw, Edisto, and Sewees, names that promenade our culture to this day. But also after this, many French people came, who gave us names such as Ori, Manigault, Mazik, Buste, Ravenel, and many that are difficult for outsiders to pronounce. Following that, in 1670, the English settlers came, and they also wrote an edict, incidentally, granting religious freedom to all who came, including a large Jewish population, which, as some of you may know, was the largest Jewish population in North America at that particular time. This included such individuals as distinction, such as Francis Salvador, the first Jewish man to ever hold public office in these United States. And Mr. Salvador was also the first Jewish American to die in the American Revolution. However, the story of the black Charlestonian is considerably different. They first came with Captain Nathaniel Sale aboard the ship Three Brothers in 1670. Their names were John, John Jr., and his wife Elizabeth. However, since these individuals were prized for their skills in growing rice, soon the black slave population outnumbered the white population within the Charleston area. However, as we all know, these individuals did not share the freedom as these other individuals, which led, of course, to great slave rebellions, such as the Stono Rebellion of 1739 and the aborted Denmark-Vesey Rebellion of 1822. When Mr. Vesey was caught and executed for his role in that rebellion, a fort was built to put down slave rebellions. That fort is today a school that we know as the Citadel. And of course, one of the major problems of slavery was that in order to keep individuals enslaved, they had to, of course, prevent them from receiving an education and, of course, lower their self-esteem, an act that has caused ramifications with us to this very day. However, in 1868, 3 years after the freedom was granted, 76 blacks and 43 whites got together downtown and produced a reformed constitution in South Carolina that provided for public schools and a universal one-man, one-vote. This lasted for nearly 30 years. However, groups such as the Red Shirts, which was an offshoot of the Ku Klux Klan, rose to power, and therefore many of these things were squashed and the Jim Crow era of South Carolina began. And one of the real unfortunate tragedies of that experience was that because the schools were segregated, the waste of money in having two separate school systems kept both sides from achieving their full potential in this city and in this state. However, one of the good things about that was that many good people on both sides and many religious faiths rose to the occasion to put a stop to these atrocities. Men such as J. Waites Waring, one of the aristocrats of the cities of Charleston, as a judge ruled in favor of integrated schools and spoke out for equal rights. And for this he was run out of town in 1952. However, when he was buried here in 1968, there were 6 whites and a total of more than 300 blacks came to watch his burial on a rainy day in appreciation for his good works. There was the great Miss Septima Clark, who the highway is named after. She went on to teach many illiterate adults how to read and write so they can register to vote and assert their civil rights. There was the great Mr. Esau Jenkins from Johns Island, a man with only a 4th grade education, but even with that 4th grade education, he shared what he knew with others to teach them to read and write and assert their civil rights. And he also formed businesses which formed employment throughout the city of Charleston. And speaking of that, he was also a close associate of Martin Luther King as well as Dr. King's man in Charleston. Then there was the great lawyer Bill Ackerman, a Jewish lawyer who worked hard behind the scenes to make things better in Charleston, bringing the first integrated football and baseball teams in Charleston and working with businesses to support the equality of all human beings. Space forbids me from going into great detail about these and other great gentlemen, but one of the beautiful things about that story is that just as we have come together this evening, of all groups, of all races, and all religions, to support the cause of the Shifa Clinic, this is a fulfillment of the great scriptures of each of our religions. It reminds us, as the Jewish people teach in the Torah, that God made man in his own image. It reminds us, as the New Testament teaches us, in Acts 17:26, that he had made of one blood all nations for men to dwell upon the face of the earth. It reminds us, as the Muslims believe in the Holy Quran, 49th Surah and 13th Ayah, O mankind, we have created you from a single male and female, and made you into nations and tribes, so that ye may know one another, and not that ye may despise one another. It reminds us, as the Hindus say in their scriptures, when you know no peace, how could you know joy? And finally, it reminds us in the words of Baha'u'llah of the Baha'i faith that mankind is one. Thank you.
Can we have another round of applause, please? I heard there was a lot of history here, but I thank